Alrighty, guys. Well, it looks like we're settling up here in kind of the middle of today's range. I do think we're probably going to find a close somewhere around this area, unless enough longs got caught overhead to kind of fuel a little bit of a move lower. If anything happens that would, require our attention for a scalp or a trade, I'll just pause the webinar. But I think, yeah, just to make sure we have enough time to go over everything, I thought, let's zoom out and talk a little bit about the context, what led us to where we are today. We'll get into some ideas for tomorrow. I think the day trading has been unfortunately slow for a couple of days now, a few days really. Tough context again at the open today. We'll get into that, but basically the play today for me was we had a gap down open, and it was going to be too late for short. After 10 a.m., we were already getting to the second and potentially final target under 63 for the sellers. And then we had that major bounce zone below. So I was much, much more interested today in a weak open after a gap down and a bounce play, versus trying to get short in a chart that's already basically made the move. So we had our eyes in the right place today for the bounce. And we do actually, like I said earlier, there's without a shadow of a doubt, the context is going to be much more interesting looking for tomorrow since we got that gap down out of the way. We spent a lot of time today consolidating, retested a key level at 74.10, and now we actually have some interesting ideas in play for both sides. We'll get into those in a few minutes, guys. Just a quick review of where we're at on the chart. So daily chart perspective, just absolute insanity. Something like 8 weeks of nonstop buying. 0 attempts to break below the daily EMA. We had several bounce zones on the way up. None of them got tested. It just kept buying and buying. I think the last good one we had was like full big one was 70.80. And since then, it's been mostly day trading and just like we haven't really had any bigger pullbacks to get any zones going. So we had 2 levels today. They could be used as short targets or potential bounce zones. Now, 63 I considered that to be yesterday a major bounce zone. We didn't quite reach it yesterday. Today, I kind of switched it to more of like, it's a minor level. It's not that reasonably super aggressive there. The reason I changed it, guys, is because we had prior support at 75, really close by. And hourly EMA and 4-hour EMA were not really that far off. VWAP was right overhead. So it just actually would have been a lot better for this to sell a little bit lower for us, rather than try to be aggressive and potentially be buying into resistance over 79. So a little tricky stuff in the context that we'll get to, but big picture. So daily chart, you saw it, nothing but up, basically. We've had a couple of attempts, small attempts, for the sellers to kind of overtake the 4-hour chart. And each time that they've been trying to reverse on the 4-hour chart, it continues to hold the daily EMA, which then leads to shorts getting caught, new flags, and continuations. These are mostly happening on the bigger time frames, but that's where we're seeing them, is these short traps, reclaim flag, short trap, reclaim flag, et cetera, which finally led us to getting a bit of a blow-off top last week. Last Friday, I was all over the short side on this. There was 2 spots that were actionable on the short side, and it was really just my best guess was at 75.40 on Friday. Might be again, wasn't a level. There's nothing to look at here. I was just basically measuring out the range we were in, and I kind of guesstimated that 35 to 40 would be a good place to look at short, in theory. But again, no real substantial level or anything up there to look at. It was all-time highs. It's price discovery, so that was just my best guess, and it was a lucky guess. But we had reversed under the 4-hour chart trend under Thursday evening into Friday. Here's the important thing. So Friday, we actually did have a short bias. Sorry, guys, I think I meant to say Thursday was where the counter trend short ideas were. Friday, we had a short bias chart intraday, so much like today, opened short bias. But yesterday, it was already too extended to the downside to get short. Friday was already too extended to the downside to get short. So it needed to bounce and do a fail flag, which it finally did Friday, which led to Sunday gap down. We attempted to reclaim the 4-hour chart trend, and this is what we've been looking for, is that the bulls are going to get this back together. They need to get back over that 4-hour EMA, which they tried to do on Monday between 6 and 10 a.m. But what they failed to do on yesterday, was to hold over it. So yesterday in the morning, right, we were looking for this to hold and see if we could get it to multi-day flag, which would then lead to a daily chart flag potentially in some levels higher. They failed to do that, which I'm totally fine with, because I think that the chart's been overblown, it's been overbought, and pullbacks are a good thing. However, the plan that we had yesterday coming into today was the level today that was of importance mainly was 74.10. Yesterday into the close, we were discussing it as 74.30 because 74.30 at that point would again be the level that the bulls would need to recover and hold for us to get into a long bias today. So back over, hold, open and flag. So nothing wrong with that. That'd be a long bias signal for sure on my end. But in the overnight session, they pushed over 30, rejected it pretty harshly and pretty quickly. And then there was a break of 74.10, which was actually technically a 4-hour chart sell signal. So after failing to recover the trend after a failed flag over the EMA, this is what I consider a sell signal or a short signal if the context is right. So that was overnight, and that led us a little bit lower. They had one more test even. They went back and checked it again at 74.30, again overnight. 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. candle, once again rejected. So where that left us at the open today was 74.30, still a relevant level, but the main level today was actually going to be 74.10. This was the trigger that got sellers selling or shorts coming in at 74.10 overnight. And it was actually where everything intersected. The 1-hour chart EMA, 4-hour chart EMA was intersecting at 74.10. VWAP was at 74.10 this morning as well. Everything was kind of going to revolve around that. If we open below it, it's short bias, and if we recover it and hold over it, it's going to be long bias. So pretty simple in terms of discovering what the bias was going to be this morning. The tricky part today was the context. So we had already had a gap down. So it was a gap down move on SPX and SPY from yesterday's close. And in my opinion, and honestly, guys, the vast majority of the time that we have a gap down open, it's either going to be sideways almost all day, and then we get a late day signal for a continuation because it's always going to be too extended for an easy move lower. Almost, I'd say 9 out of 10 times. It's going to be very difficult after the first dip in the open to get a continuation without a bunch of bull trapping, a bunch of sideways, and some help from the bigger time frames. So when we have a gap down move and then a sell at the open, I'm almost always going to be mainly focused on looking at bounce plays with the intent to trap shorts into a level lower that's too late to short and to look for a bounce like we saw today. Now, these are the levels on the 4-hour chart. These are the levels we had lower. So mind you that we've been moving up so much that we have been sort of developing new levels as we go. And a lot of the bigger levels lower we have not back tested yet, so those could be coming at some point. But I'm just going to direct your attention to the two levels that were in play today for potential bounces. The first one now, 73.63, this is the swing low from May 12th. And if you look at the daily chart, it's this daily chart low right here. It's well under the daily EMA. It would be kind of breaking under yesterday's lows. It'd be way crazy for shorts to be shorting down there with this daily chart. Tons of weakness over 3 days already, especially in this market environment. Not really favorable for shorts there. The 4-hour chart in itself had a lot of trouble with the look. I think that it needed that back test of 74.10, which finally happened into the close. But at the open today, it was just a lot of already downside look on the 4-hour chart. Didn't really look like a setup. To me, the last good looking setup on the 4-hour chart was the overnight 74.10 break right here. That's a failed flag over the EMA. That's the entry for shorts on the 4-hour frame. They probably weren't even looking at shorts today under 85, and unless they reloaded on the 74.10 push. So the way that I would see it today is interesting. Like I said, I feel like the 63 level I treated it as more of a minor level, not as urgent as it would be if we reached the next major level down, 37. But I want to explain why yesterday that this 63 area would have been a little better than today, or even Sunday evening. So where we get the most out of these bounce plays is when the market is trending down hard into a level like that. So Sunday evening, if we hit that, there's going to be all kinds of room on that hourly chart and 4-hour chart for back tests higher. In this case, almost 100 points. If we had gotten into this level, I was watching it closely. I kind of had a price alert down there, and I was fully intending on looking at that to grab along, even if it was Sunday evening, if there was a setup. So that was, we already bounced up there. Now, yesterday, I still think it was definitely actionable. I was actually watching very closely. If we break 63 here, again, it's still just the first test under the daily EMA. There's no daily chart reversal yet. I would expect this to come back and retest the 4-hour and hourly EMAs yesterday intraday, and though my focus was definitely on looking at longs down here. Today, it's always a little bit different and a little bit more tricky. The more that you consolidate just over a level, the lower the quality becomes a bit, because we've had a lot of testing around this area now. It's no longer really that extended from those bigger time frames at this point. And while it is definitely, I would call it a minor level, it's a swing low from, early May that would be a place where swing longs would stop out from, and often we will see some exhaustion and a bounce at levels like those. The context intraday today was very tricky for that to be used as at least aggressively as a bounce play. So just to be clear, like I would absolutely have taken a bounce long setup if the 5-minute chart provided a good looking setup for it, or if the 15-minute chart had something that was reasonable for it as well. But the way I'm seeing it this morning is the context is tough now, because we had prior support for 2 days now at 75, right? 75 support here on Monday, and then overnight, then again intraday. That was where they swept the intraday lows and then bounced. And then we had resistance potentially at 75 and 85. So this is where, kind of where I'll draw the line on where I'll play flags is if it's going to be right into a bunch of resistance in a VWAP area, that's probably not going to be a spot that I'm going to go after. Days like today really bode best for weak open. Shorts get trapped into a level they shouldn't be shorting too late, whether it's 63 or 37, and then look for that first big bounce out of it. Tricky though, because again, didn't really get a setup or a signal intraday for a bounce play, and that 63 area was awfully close to 75 potential resistance and 75 to 84, which was another support that could become resistance. Hourly EMA right overhead, not really super extended there because we spent a lot of the overnight and pre-market session consolidating. So just it just didn't really have the recipe for like, oh, let's just go, smash this at 79. It was my opinion that shorts would get stopped out over this shelf at 78, 75, but there was so much trouble overhead there. Frankly, I wasn't really anticipating that we'd have a move that big. I was a little bit surprised there, but one thing that I'm really liking that I'm seeing as of late, the last couple of days, is a little bit different, is the fact that longs, some of these moves have been pretty silly. This is no different. It went through all of the downtrending moving averages. It cut through VWAP. It went through resistances. It had no trouble getting through there. But that's sort of been the going rate during this manic, at times, and definitely euphoric bullish market environment the last 8 weeks. Is there's been some really, really shockingly, surprisingly strong moves that really just aren't seeing pullbacks at times. And the longs have actually been able to get away with, for the most part, been able to get away with taking really poor, late longs or chasing, and just ultimately doing things that may work in this brief period of a market environment that we're in that are just not going to work in the long term. And that's, like I said earlier, guys, that's kind of the reason why I don't really switch things up, because we just want what works on average, not what works only today or tomorrow, but on average. So I don't think that, it's been the most normal market environment. It's been pretty extreme, but we're finally coming back down to earth, and I'm starting to see like signs like these types of moves. The bulls are still trying on them, but now they're failing to get them to work. So what that's going to do is create more overhead, create more sellers, kind of help us get to some of those levels lower. As far as the intraday session goes, I think that the only really good chance that shorts had on this was to take the immediate hourly chart bear flag right out of the gate. They had 3 lower highs stacked overhead at 74.05, which is close to 74.10, key level and resistance. It did have already a gap down, so I think that was a little bit aggressive, especially in the market environment we've been in that's been so bullish. But it looked like it was going to trap him. It dipped down and it almost held up. And then we did close that first hourly chart candle between 9 and 10 a.m. under the EMA, which would then indicate continued short bias for sure. And then they did manage to get to that next level down at 63. So short bias at the open, tough context to expect a ton of continuation. Definitely lends better to hoping the shorts get trapped and looking for a bounce. But unfortunately, the intraday session just didn't do a whole lot for us. Again, with a lot of trouble, like even though it's likely that shorts will get stopped out over 79, there was a 15-minute chart flag there, and it was actually the break of a prior hourly chart candle's high. I expected there to be some resistance, high 80s, low 90s, things of that nature. But looks like the longs did get trapped there, and it does appear that 74.10 is going to remain a big contending level going forward, and there's actually a pretty good chance now that we're going to see a look at a bounce zone or two tomorrow at this point, or we have a chance for a multi-day flag. So let's talk about the key 74.10 area, what this is going to look like for us going into tomorrow, and what the game plan is going to be for tomorrow. Because if we open up in this range, we have a better context today for both potentially long and short. Excuse me, we have better context tomorrow by far than we did today. A gap down overnight, week open is not good context for short. Okay, it wasn't good context for long either, unless we got a bounce play, but it definitely wasn't the right way to go for short side, especially after 10 a.m. under like 70 to 80 area. So now it's a little bit different. We've had another back test of the 74.11 area. We've rejected it again. The sellers are showing us something that we haven't seen in some time. I mean, I'm kind of surprised, honestly, guys, that considering how strong things were leading up to this, that they haven't even had one good attempt at a 4-hour chart flag on this leading up to today, which is probably a good thing, I think, because what that potentially could do for us is if we do end up selling lower tomorrow, regardless if we get a short or not, there'll be more room for a bounce, and eventually that 4-hour chart is going to flag. It could turn into a multi-day move. So I like it if they keep it heavy and keep it selling. So, but as far as like what we'd be looking for in terms of trades for tomorrow, obviously if we open under 74.10 and if we stay under 74.10, it technically would be intraday short bias. My preference for short will always be this. If we happened to, and I'm not saying I suspect this is going to happen, but if we happen to get any kind of 4-hour chart push over 74.10 that rejects, this would really help with the short side going into tomorrow for a possible continuation. Mainly just to get a flag back over the EMA and see it fail, which would surely take out today's shorts, trap bulls overhead, and then have a clear path here as to where the trend could continue lower across, ideally, not just 4-hour chart, but ideally across the hourly chart and 15-minute chart also. A more aggressive look for the short side would be if we end up a little bit more sideways in the overnight session, but still would be good to see some kind of even mid-range flag attempt, just to really see, even if it just tests around 74.10, this is still okay. It's not quite as good, but still okay. For the long side, it's ideally what we would want to see for the long side really is, well, what I want to see is a bounce play, because that's where the most value is going to be. But we want it to not only get back over 74.10, but back test and hold it. That needs to become like a very confirmed support. And if it does, then we're back over the daily EMA. We're back over the 4-hour EMA. We haven't had a multi-day flag in this chart for some time, since before Thursday at least. So yeah, I mean, that'd be a good look. So I think that either way is good. And then we have bounce zones below. I don't think I would bother with today's low. It's probably a little close to everything. I'll probably be looking at that first level down at 37 tomorrow. And if we had somehow managed to, with the help of some news or something along those lines, get an actual deeper dip down, then I would likely be interested in looking at that next spot down, which is under 72.93, which there's actually a gap here. So SPX, this would be an extreme. I do not expect this to happen without some kind of a fail flag or something first, but just for reference, this is an interesting area. There was a gap that was never filled down here, and it's a little bit far away unless something significant happens, maybe this weekend to next, or if some news triggers. But I like the look of like maybe filling. If we fill that gap, it's a spot I want to be watching for sure. And it's, believe it or not, it's not even really that close to the weekly EMA. This is the one time frame that'll get you scratching your head. This move is crazy. And today's break of 63 was actually the first break of a weekly chart candles low in 8 weeks. So I mean, it's been pretty significant, and you can see how far away that weekly chart EMA is as well. It's still a mile down there. So even with that gap fill, it's still not even close to the weekly EMA. This would be a major zone on the weekly chart to watch around the EMA down here. we're not going to get too much into that. It's pretty far away. I don't think we're going to see those levels anytime soon. So the main stuff for tomorrow, guys, is going to be revolving around 74.10. Either it needs to recover and hold over to set up a multi-day flag. Intraday, we could end up with short bias tomorrow. It would be potentially a little bit more interesting than today, assuming that we get some kind of a fail flag overnight or a really good confirmation of resistance and a new setup. I just feel like the gap down today kind of killed the short side when it opened weak. And then, of course, the bounce plays lower. So we'll be looking at all those ideas going into tomorrow and kind of see which one hits first, really, just which one looks the best and which one hits first. I guess the only other note I would make, guys, is there was a question of whether to take a 5-minute chart counter trend short signal at 0950. I had a slight distraction with the baby at that point. Just didn't really see until it broke. I knew it was setting up, but I was like, I just unfortunately wasn't watching when it broke, and I was wondering. So since it broke and I hadn't taken a close look at it, I just popped on the stream and talked it through as if like I was just seeing it, which I was. And the way that I saw it was, okay, so this is valid in terms of risk reward. We have the 1-to-1 risk reward from the trigger price to that 5-minute EMA. The 15-minute chart was definitely looking toppish and heavy there. We're right on the 74.10 area, so there's a lot of confluence there between the 15-minute chart, 74.10 being potentially key resistance. What I would say that is the only question mark there was I didn't think that by any means that this hourly chart was just going to roll over red. So in order for this trade to really work, it needed to do what it did here, which is close the hourly chart green and then fail to recover 74.10, then roll. Just for reference, it technically is a valid signal for a scalp. I was thinking today if we could fill that gap to 26 or even break 33, like anything up here would be a layup. At that point, if we're just coming right off those lows into that area, this is going to almost certainly backtest 74.10, and then it would just be a bonus if they lost 74.10. So that's where I was kind of at odds with this area here, but mainly once the trigger price is behind me, I usually won't go after it late unless it's really good looking and it's like I know that I'm missing something. The reason I don't like to go after it late is because a big part of these counter trend short trades is making sure that you get those initial profit targets in the first dip. If you don't do that, if you don't get that first dip, it's kind of brutal because it's really, as you can see, it's never as easy as a bounce play. You're going to be sitting through a lot of flags, and this I believe this could have actually held, despite all that confluence of 74.10. I still believe this could have actually held potentially there and still flagged through. So that's where I was at with that. And pretty weak close today, guys. I think that those overhead longs who chased it up to 74.10 are not liking this move. They're kind of helping us fuel it a little bit lower. Hopefully they can keep it interesting for us tomorrow. If we do happen to get a gap down overnight, if the selling continues, I mean, watch under 37, but don't marry it. If we did get to the next one down, I'd be super hot on that. That's going to be very extended and a very good place to look. I'll be looking for valid setups under 37, but doesn't have to be an automatic trade or anything to fight. Just depends on the context each day. And like I've been saying, the more that we spend consolidating around close to a level, the less high quality it becomes. So we want to get the further ones if we can. But of course, I will be watching that level closely. Depending on how we get there, it just depends on how we get there. If we trade sideways overnight, then there's a short in the morning and it comes in really hot and it's extended, then yes, I would look under here for a bounce. But at this point, if we reach that level, I'm going to be kind of anticipating that we're probably going to find resistance now where the support was around 70. So you can imagine how much better it would be if we can get that next one down, which, maybe if we got some news or just if really things start falling apart, it's possible. So worth mentioning. Anyways, guys, we'll see how we do tomorrow morning. We'll kind of we'll review the chart together in pre-market as per usual, just kind of reconfirm the levels that we'll be watching and take it from there. Thank you for tuning in today, guys. Have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.